Hello everyone. Today we are going to be talking about drinking water. Drinking water, also known as potable water, is that water that is safe to drink and human and animal consumption. It is arguably the most important element for the survival of human life. A human being can survive 4 to 5 days without consuming food, but without drinking water, even surviving 6 to 7 hours can be really difficult. Shortage of water in the body can lead to a number of problems such as dizziness, amnesia, and eventually death. The amount of drinking water required to maintain good health varies on different factors such as physical activity, age, health, environmental conditions, etc. The planet might be 70% water, but only 4% of it is actually fit for drinking. This is because most of the water available is seawater, that is saline and unfit for human consumption. It is said that more people on Earth die from unsafe water consumption than from war. Shortage of water is known to cause wars as well, such as the current ongoing crisis in North Africa. Water shortage is one of the reasons why we have seen a rise in the number of refugees migrating to Europe. Now let us discuss water supply. That is, how is water brought from its natural source and delivered to households? The most efficient and convenient way to transport and deliver drinking water is through pipes. In order to do that, sufficient requirement of capital is necessary for proper plumbing facilities. Plumbing is a combination of pumps and pipes through which water is provided to households. Tap water is delivered by domestic water systems. It refers to water that is piped to homes and delivered via a tap. Many less wealthy nations do not have sufficient or appropriate infrastructure, because of which people might have to spend a higher fraction of their income on ensuring a non-stop water supply. Now let us talk about the factors that affect water supply. While these factors differ from country to country, some of them are universal. First is capital costs. Capital cost is a fixed one-time expense that is spent on purchasing land, buildings, construction, and equipment. It is used in production of goods and services. It is the price that is needed for bringing a project to a commercial status. Second factor, personnel costs. These are the costs incurred in the process of hiring labor and manpower. Both skilled and unskilled labor will be required in a project that requires supply of water to households. Third is geographical barriers. Piping and plumbing has to take into account the geographical conditions that a community lives in. For example, drilling a bore or a bore well in a region that is sensitive to earthquakes can cause real problems. Hence, these kind of factors have to be kept in mind. Last is water availability. This is related to geographical barriers. It means to the total amount of distance between the community that needs water and the natural resource which has water. Based on the distance, strategies are adopted to ensure a seamless supply of water. Now let us talk about institutions and governance. Around the world, a variety of institutions have been given responsibilities to ensure seamless water supply. A basic distinction is between A. Institutions that are responsible for policy and regulation, and the B. Institutions that are in charge of providing actual services. Policy and regulation is mostly in the hands of the executive. However, in some cases, the legislature also acts as a consultant. The institutional type depends from region to region and country to country. In the United States, it is the United States Environmental Protection Agency, in short known as EPA, which reports directly to the President and is responsible for water and sanitation policy. This is a bureaucratic institution that is responsible to the head of the state. On the other hand, countries like Mexico have a separate Ministry of Environment, thereby directly being in control of the policymakers. Countries like India have a specifically established Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation. Now, let us talk about the financial aspects of drinking water supply. Cost of supplying water consists of fixed costs, which will be capital costs and personnel costs, and to a small extent, variable costs. These are the costs that depend on the amount of water that are being consumed by the household. Cost of supplying water in urban areas of developed countries is quite high. This is probably because the water consumption level of these countries is also very high. Cost of water supply in developing countries, however, are somewhat lower. This is because not only is consumption of water lower in developing countries, but subsidies are also granted by the government to make sure that the cost of water remains low. Apart from subsidies, water supply investments are financed both through A. Internally generated revenues as well as B. Debt. Internally generated revenues refers to tax money collected by the governmental organizations, while debt means loans taken from banks. It can take the form of either loans from commercial banks or from international financial institutions such as world banks. India is the world's largest debt taker when it comes to building infrastructure. To make up for their costs, service providers also charge tariffs. According to the World Bank, the average global water tariff is $0.53 per cubic meter. That cost is much higher in developed countries, that is $1, while in the poorest countries and the developing countries, it's barely $0.1. The lowest tariff on water supply is said to be in South Asia. In developing countries, tariffs are usually much further from covering costs. Covering costs means the difference between the cost of acquiring substitute goods under an agreement and the price for actual price of the good or service. When tariffs are greater than covering costs, it just means that there is a lack of supplier and people don't really have much options other than the one supplier they have. Let us study the organizational structure of water supply industries. The most common structure of water supply is that of ownership by local governments. In countries like France, they have municipal associations in communes. These associations play a key role in water and sanitation provision. In countries like India, arrangement for water supply and sanitation varies. Usually, there is a state level agency which is in charge of planning and investment, while the local government is said to be in charge of operation and maintenance. In rural areas, there are over 100,000 water supply systems. In some states, responsibility for service provision has been partially transferred from state water board to Panchayati Raj institutions. In tribal areas, water supply is often devolved to autonomous tribal councils. There's also a system where water is owned by the national government. This is popular in developing countries, and one of the most common example is that of Israel. They have a state-owned national water company called Mekorot, which is responsible for water supply throughout the country. One major reason for this approach is that A. Israel is a small country and therefore can afford centralization, and B. Being a semi-arid or arid region, it has a shortage of water, thereby needs central control. Now let us talk about the Department of Drinking Water and Sanitation of India. This department comes under the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation, also has been merged with Ministry of Jal Shakti. This department provides technical as well as financial assistance to the states. Its purpose is to provide safe and adequate drinking water to people of rural India. The department has been running a centrally sponsored scheme titled National Rural Drinking Water Program, which was recently restructured and subsumed into the Jal Jeevan Mission. The primary duties of this institute is to ensure infrastructure for tap water connection, reliable drinking water source, augmentation of the existing sources of drinking water, transfer of water, as well as technological intervention so as to make saline water potable. The deadline that has been granted for this task is 2024. Let us talk about Jal Jeevan Mission. The central government assistance to states for rural water began in 1972. It was later renamed as National Rural Drinking Water Program in 2009. This NRDWP was subsumed under the Jal Jeevan Mission by the current government. One of the objectives is to enable all households to have access to and use safe and adequate drinking water within premises to the extent possible. It was proposed to achieve the goal by 2030. However, the Government of India has brought down the deadline to 2024. The kind of works that have been proposed under Jal Jeevan Mission are in-village water supply, infrastructure for tap water connection for every household, reliable drinking water source development, transfer of water, technological intervention for treatment to make water potable, retrofitting of completed and ongoing piped water supply schemes, and grey water management, which means management of water that is generated from households or office buildings from streams which do not have fecal contamination, that is, they are not wastewater. Let us solve a couple of multiple choice questions. Question 1. What is the deadline set for the Jal Jeevan Mission? A. 2021, B. 2024, C. 2027, or D. 2025? Correct answer B. 2024. Jal Jeevan Mission is a repackaging of National Rural Drinking Water Program in 2009. This program was subsumed under the Jal Jeevan Mission, whose plan was originally to achieve the goal by 2030, but now it has been brought down to 2024. The purpose is to provide a functional household tap connection for rural areas. 2. Which of the following is not a factor affecting water supply? A. Capital costs, B. Water availability, C. Geographical barriers, or D. None of the above? Correct answer D. None of the above. All the three aforementioned factors are important and they affect water supply greatly. Capital costs requires to the financial requirements needed to buy critical infrastructure. In this case, it would be pipelines, land, pumps, etc. Second is obviously water availability, which refers to distance between the nearest water source and the household which needs water. Depending on that distance, water supply is affected. And third is geographical barriers. Areas that have mountainous terrain are very difficult to negotiate, and therefore the costs in establishing water infrastructure is much more higher.